coming here today. We hope you enjoyed yesterday's program, which was very rich in terms of expertise and experiences shared. And I think also the exchange that we had was very, let's say, interesting, and at the same time it inspired a lot of us with new ideas. I hope you also enjoyed the nice dinner that we had yesterday, the nice social event, which helped us also get to know each other in an informal setting, which is also very important in these cases. As you know, this is the first time we had this consultative forum in Brussels. This is the fourth one that we have organized, but the first one in Brussels, and also the first one where we've linked content-related thematic sessions to the consultative forum, and that was done yesterday. Today, we have the plenary session in the morning, where the executive director will give us an account of what EASO has done throughout the year and how we have cooperated with civil society in the different areas of our work. And he will also give you the plan of what we plan to do next year. You have the work program available outside. Probably you already took copies of it so that you can see what EASO plans to do next year. That's the whole work program, and it also indicates areas where we'll cooperate with civil society. But the work program is also available on our website. It can be downloaded from there as well. So without taking more of your time, I invite the executive director to open the session. Thank you.
It works. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I hope that you are all wide awake, and those other 100 participants that are still asleep will certainly slip in later today. That is the result of a one-day annual conference that takes 1.5 days, but we can certainly cope with that. I will not address you now. I will do that later on, but I want to really welcome Laura Ferrara, most welcome here, member of the European Parliament, and she has the floor to address.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests. I would like to thank the European Asylum Support Office for the invitation to today's forum. It is an honor for me to represent the Committee for Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs Committee of the European Parliament, of which I am a full member and the coordinator for the FDD group. The European Asylum Support Office Consultative Forum is of utmost importance to develop and strengthen the dialogue with civil society, whose effort in the field and expertise are instrumental to the work of the Support Office. Ongoing contacts with the organization on the spot represent an essential tool to complete the information received for the Member States' authorities and to capture in due time any alerts of malfunctioning and of systems or exemplary good practices. The timely and coherent implementation of the common European asylum system is now a key priority. Institutions had to negotiate over more than 4 years to recast the first generation of asylum legislation. The common standards should improve the system globally. We have seen in the past that deficiencies in reception conditions or asylum procedures have often created crisis situations in member states, or given the opportunity to courts to denounce a serious violation of human rights. In the context of reception conditions and asylum procedures, an efficient system allowing for a quick identification of special needs of vulnerable persons was very important for the European Parliament. Within the category of vulnerable persons, minors, and in particular unaccompanied minors, are a core group. The detention conditions are the right to an effective remedy were equally important. In the procedures, the importance of solid first instance decisions based on good interviewing and adequate information have always been a priority. We recommend the European Asylum Support Office to focus in its training activities in particular on these elements, because only then a common European asylum system that creates trust among member states for applicants and towards the Union citizens will be created. It's important as well to again highlight that this can only be realized by a multi-actor framework. And therefore, again, this meeting of today is important, as only the input of all actors, not only state authorities, but civil society organizations as well, can bring us closer to the common European asylum system. In the context of qualification, important issues such as the assessment elements for taking into account the best interests of the child, the gender dimension into the membership of a particular social group as a persecution ground, the actor of a persecution in Article 7 of the Qualification Directive, and the internal protection were all into the list of European Parliament priorities. And with the imminent evaluation Commission report on this directive, we are confident that statistical information and findings of EASO workshops can feed into these points in the evaluation. The Dublin regulation should now be fully implemented, and for the upcoming evaluation, it's very important that EASO can provide for a large range of statistical data in order to allow the co-legislators to assess the efficiency and cost-effectiveness of the system. The data collected should be as detailed as possible, including details on minors and accompanied minors. Especially in times of high pressure, the system seems to have lost its credibility, and courts seem to confirm this tendency. In the Dublin regulation, European Parliament negotiated the following drafting. A comprehensive fitness check should be foreseen by conducting an evidence-based review covering the legal, economic and social effects of the Dublin system, including its effects on fundamental rights. A full part of the implementation of the Dublin regulation is Article 33, that provides for a mechanism for early warning, preparedness and crisis management. This mechanism provides for a two-stage planning by member states that are under a substantiated risk of particular pressure on their asylum system and or have problems in the functioning of their asylum system. So far, the article was not yet been applied, although quite a lot of particular pressure on specific member states has been reported, and the court judgments have confirmed deficiencies in their asylum systems, not the least since the existing humanitarian crisis faced by many countries in the immediate Union neighbourhood. Indeed, we have seen the EASO has often offered operational support to the member states that are under pressure. But as we all know, this pressure are, for reasons of long-lasting conflicts and wars surrounding the Union, exceptional and beyond normal capacities to respond for any member states. And they put very high first instance and immediate demands on the reception systems that no regular system can absorb. The origin and nature of the current huge refugee flows call for more operational support coordinated by EASO from resources provided by other member states, not situated at these borders of the Union. This is a specific situation where our solidarity engagement should take over, and where we should assist in a common effort the thousands of refugees fleeing war, stranded at our shores and having nowhere else to go. The framework of Article 33 Dublin Regulation could provide for trust if indeed a member state would not keep the pace of normal reception flexibility and fundamental rights demands if Union funding were not correctly dispersed. However, without doubt, enhanced cooperation among member states in the operational assistance is not a choice, but an obligation in the current circumstances. The common European asylum system has only just been adopted and yet seems to call for a new chapter. Many persons fleeing war do not find any safe entry into the Union in order to get access to protection. Member States at the external borders, their society, their asylum system are suffering under the burden of this humanitarian disaster. More and more, the Union sees the need for a common response, a solidarity mechanism at Union level. Pilot projects run by EASO, such as assisted processing, pooling of reception places, and projects with third countries, can give inspiration for future developments. For these reasons, the European Parliament would be most interested if the Director could soon come and comment on the findings of these projects. The Parliament has, since its creation, been a very big promoter of the Common European Union Resettlement Programme. In both legislative negotiations on resettlements, the European Parliament has insisted on an important facilitating and coordinating role for EASO in order to shape the necessary climate for high participation rates by Member States in any resettlement activities. Again, this call is repeated here as in a parliament's legal route to the Union, with no need for persons fleeing war zones to seek assistance of smugglers or traffickers, or to launch in a dangerous journey over the sea, is perceived as a key tool for a necessary humanitarian response of solidarity to the refugees and third countries taking much more than their share of solidarity. The resettlement and a common union coordination by EASO should be given a higher degree of attention, being part of the external dimension of the common European asylum system. Many thanks once again for your attention. I wish all a fruitful further second day of dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your most inspiring words that will guide us through the day. Let me say a few words on reaction. I know you have to leave to work again in the Parliament, but I'm very happy what you have been stressing, especially where you put the finger on the fact that data are so important. Yes. We all have a lot of images. Media bring images to our eyes, but it's so important for us to really consider what is the reality, what are the facts, what are the figures, and then take the different next steps that are necessary. And in the end, what we're working for is a fair system. A system that is common, a system that works at the same way from Finland to Cyprus, from Portugal to what other country shall I take? Even the UK, though they have an opt-out. I think that is our main goal, a common European asylum system. And as you said, you just finalized the second phase of the common European asylum system. But as we all know, the dynamics of migration is such that you can speak about the second phase, but there certainly will be next phases. Reality doesn't stop, and that's good. Last but certainly not least, may I thank the European Parliament, Libe Committee in particular, for their very, very constant and solid support. It's always a pleasure for me as director to be in the committee and to have a real dialogue there as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. The program today also includes the breakout sessions, and we have 4 breakout sessions after the coffee break, so after the director makes his intervention now. One on country of origin information, so the production and the sharing of common country of origin information, EU level, a workshop on operational support, a workshop on quality processes, and a workshop on the EASO information and documentation system. You all have different colored tags, and the tags indicate which workshop you should be in because you have booked or requested that type of workshop. So just to recapitulate so that you know, those who have opted for the COI breakout session, you have a green color-coded tag. Those who opted for the EASO operational support breakout session have a red coded tag. Those who opted for the quality processes have a purple color-coded tag, and those who opted for the IDS information documentation system session have a brown color-coded tag. But now I will give the floor to the Executive Director, who will address us, give us the account of what we have done during 2014 and plans for 2015 for cooperation with civil society. Executive Director.
Thank you very much, Mark. Welcome once again, more officially in the what is already 4th annual Consultative Forum. Consultative Forum is one of the pillars of the work of EASO. It's more than an annual gathering because for us it is a constant process. It's a dialogue with civil society in all its diversity, NGOs, international organizations, academics, member states also, and different institutions. It's a very important point of reference for us in our work, because we work in a complicated and, as I said before, dynamic environment where reality and images are not always concurring. And it's so important to remain attached to all those different realities outside of this room and to constantly check and double check what is the situation really. That is a starting point. From there we can work on solutions that will be debated because there are many different views, and also for that reason it's extremely important to have a dialogue with the civil society, with the reality on the ground in all its aspects. It's a very important day today. It's the 4th annual Consultative Forum. It's the only activity, nearly the only activity of EASO that is as old as EASO is. We immediately, when setting up and establishing the agency, started with our dialogue with civil society. That only underlines the fact and the importance of this forum. It's the first time we are in Brussels. That is, after listening to everybody, and nothing wrong with Malta, but by geographical means, at least, Brussels is more in the center, more reachable, more practical. And, of course, it's the European capital. Oh, now I make probably a big mistake. It is the main European capital. Reacting on the discussions last year and the reactions we had on the previous fora, we have this year a much more content-focused consultative forum. Actually, this is the only dull part of the whole forum. For the rest, yesterday and after I finish for the rest of the day, the content will be number one. And I think it should be like that. It's about, in the end, the content, what we are all concerned for, and what is our day-to-day work. We have, yesterday and today, 20 speakers from different stakeholders, from all parts of society, and we hope that that gives a very representative and at least broad input for the discussion. Speakers are persons that you have to listen to. That's inherent in the word speaker, but they're only the input for the discussion. So the discussion itself is the main aim of yesterday and today. We have this year more than 100 participants. That is a huge number. It is certainly not the total of society. That would probably never be able to be in one room, given the wide variety of organizations and actors in the field where we are active, but it represents a more than satisfactory number. We have more and more tried to involve not only the overall European organizations that represent organizations within member states, but more and more we are looking also to involve national, regional and local organizations. It's important to have the overview. In the end, what we do, what our area of concern is the common European asylum system. So you have to have that broader point of entry. But as we all know, it is built up, Europe is built up bottom up as well. So we also need very much the expertise, the input of organizations that work on a local or regional level. We see that more and more in our day-to-day operational work as well. If a member state asks us to come to their support, then in many cases there are specific situations that are not the overall view of the European approach, but that are related to situations on the ground. So also for that reason, we will more and more, and within the capacity that we have, that is by definition limited, try to involve the local organizations more. We have strengthened this year in a number of areas our relation with civil society and with academia and NGOs in particular. In total, more than 70 organizations have been consulted. We have received over 100 contributions from civil society. And we have, as promised last year, set up 3 focused consultation channels. One focused on training, one on unaccompanied minors, and one on data and early warning. The participation in these 3 areas have been very active and very productive. But it's certainly not the only areas where we involve civil society. In about all our areas, I couldn't exclude any of them, where we are active, we one way or the other involve civil society. The annual report that was launched last year in this room and the room next with a broad press conference brought about a number of contributions, and we hope that the same process this year will be repeated. The interaction with civil society is also important in specific workshops, in meetings, and in different preparations for publication. We, for example, had a consultation with civil society on the publication of Article 15C, that was already wide discussed yesterday and will have its follow-up. To facilitate the interaction, because Europe is big geographically and the number of people living in Europe, we publish a quarterly consultation calendar so that everybody timely, hopefully, can be alerted and take the initiative of sending contributions, and we see that that really works. We have also intensified our communication by the EASO newsletter, the monthly newsletter, so that all of you can see and have access to the information and the subscriptions to the newsletter, even after 3 years after its start, multiply even today, and that is in itself a good sign. What do we plan for next year? I will not go to read out the whole work program. It's available both online and if there are still copies left in the hall, you can see them. But also the continued engagement with civil society is to be read on each page of the work program. Reference groups, specific work groups, specific stakeholder queries and other forms of contact, and more, but that is a technical development that takes time. We will use the internet consultation system to be more effective and having a bigger access for everybody. I'm extremely happy that only a few days ago the management board agreed with the proposal that we have made to open up the COI portal as a public portal. That's a big step. You know that we have been working on that and we have agreement, so that will be, and it's not today, unfortunately, because it means a number of technical adaptations, but at least the decision in itself has been taken, and the follow-up is now work in progress. We will continue engaging civil society in our work on children and unaccompanied minors. You heard from the MEP just before how important that part of our work is, and we will continue on that. I said already, engaging more national and local NGOs in specifically member states where we are operationally active in supporting. We are increasing the activities in the area of resettlement. Certainly these days that is important. The Commission will come with a proposal on that area, specifically related, I suppose, on Syria for obvious reasons, or the Middle East area, maybe that is better to say these days. And EASO will take its role in that resettlement subject. The breakout sessions, one of the breakout sessions is about what we call as an abbreviation IDS, Information and Documentation System. That sounds very dull, that is extremely exciting. We have been working very hard for the last years in trying to build up information in such a way that it is sustainable. There's a lot of information, but that is one-time information, one-moment information. And then it is outdated very soon. And certainly in this area, information is very soon outdated. Yesterday you could hear from Richard Dawson about case law on Article 15C, again 15C. And those of you who attended that should realize how extremely quick the reality, also on this legal side of our work, is changing. The same is true for the practical and organizational reality in the member states. There are descriptions of the systems in each member state, and as soon as it's printed, it's outdated. It's that quick that organizations change. If you see the influx, if you see what happens, for example, in Germany, sorry. For example, in Germany, where the numbers are changing, and if numbers change, you have to adapt your organization. If numbers change quickly and in a large extent, as again in Germany, but I could name nearly all member states, then you do not only change your organization, but also your structure. And if even more changes, you change your legal system. That is in 28, including Switzerland and Norway, 30 countries, 30 member states, where that is day-to-day business. So that means that a system that could keep track on just describing the reality of today in 30 different member states, that is a big and very important tool. It's big because it's about a huge amount of information, and to keep it updated is a real big enterprise. But it is extremely necessary for the Commission to make new proposals, to know what is on the ground, for member states to look at each other and say, how do they cope with it? They have the same problems as we have, and they have a different structure. Why? Just to ask the questions. Not for us, in principle, to give the answers, but to provide the input that makes the discussion possible. And that's also, and that's why I took some more time for this, that's also why and where we can look at civil society, because civil society is involved in migration nearly everywhere. And there where it's not, also there. You can ask the question, why is it involved in this way in country X, and in another way, in the same sort of situation, in country Y. Very important fundamentals, I would say, for our common and joint work. Early warning, actually the same story. If we don't have the data of the migration flows on a very regular basis, how can we prepare ourselves for what might happen? Not what will happen, because that is impossible, but at least by having much better and much earlier and updated information, we are already now more able to prepare ourselves and at least to manage to cope with the situation as it develops. The thematic meetings that we had yesterday and the breakout sessions of today are an approach on which I would be very happy to hear your reactions, and not only in this meeting, in this session, but also outside. I asked a lot of you already on reactions, because we think that it is a step in the right direction. It is the way to increase the dialogue in a constructive and content-related way. If that feeling is correct, we will certainly try to step up in this, because also for us it is a very good way to improve our view on what happens. Last but not least, I want to thank all of you, collectively and individually, for the great support that you have been providing us. It is not an obligation deriving from our founding regulation, but it is an honor and a pleasure to work with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Executive Director. Now we open the floor. Feel free to ask questions to the Executive Director on both what we have done this year in terms of consultation. I know a number of you have been directly involved in this, and we've received your contributions, and also on the plans for next year. So please feel free to ask. Now is your time. It seems that everything is perfectly well, and we have no reactions. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the presentation here. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little more about the what you will be doing in the area of resettlement more concretely. Thank you.
Resettlement. You heard just before Parliament's reactions, and that is a consistent reaction from Parliament. When I had my hearing in Parliament the 9th of December 2010 already, there was actually only one word, one item that they put forward very, very explicitly. I won't say it was a precondition for my appointment, but at least it was a very clear signal from Parliament that once EASO would be established, that it would devote specific attention to resettlement. That is also reflected in the founding regulation of EASO. So there is a broad consensus that Europe should do jointly and joint efforts on the area of resettlement. We had 2 weeks ago, I think, the Resettlement and Relocation Forum. That is something that the Commission started last year. This was the second time to bring together the main actors and member states on the area of resettlement and relocation. And more these days, it is first resettlement that is the subject. As a consequence of that resettlement forum, the Commission is now preparing the next step and coming to a proposal. In preparation for all that, we have already started earlier this year to devote special attention to what we could do at resettlement, because it's so nice to speak about resettlement, but there are many actors already very active. To mention UNHCR, IOM, but also many others. And the last thing I want is to duplicate or to come into any form of competition. So what I see as a task for EASO in the area of resettlement is being active, becoming active in the area where you have really added value and where we do not have a role to play, where others have much more experience. That is the overall approach. Very practical. I think that being a European body, institutional organization as we are, the natural place for an agency like EASO in the resettlement area should be twofold. One, to organize the experience that is broadly but mainly national, and to see and to make available that experience to other member states, and broadly in a common approach, or at least an approach where everybody can see what are the best practices. And secondly, to organize the resettlement process within the EU. I certainly see no role for EASO at this moment to go and organize resettlement in countries of origin or countries of transit, because that is done very effectively and very good by UNHCR and by IOM. But acting from the EU is something that is not really done at this moment. And I think if we take the word common European asylum system serious, then there should be a common European resettlement approach. And that is where I think that EASO, in all its practical aspects, could play a serious role. Some call it a clearinghouse, broker, organizer of resettlement. I don't want to speak about quota, because I don't think that the word quota at this moment in the development is going to produce direct effect. As soon as you use that word, and of course I use it deliberately because I don't want to use it, then the discussion is not about the content but about the system. And let's just start and see what we can do, and then later on we can see if it is too more or too less. But being practical, as we try to be in all our approaches.
Yes, Nele, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are you planning next year any kind of activities concerning the question of access for protection for people in need of protection? That is probably not a question where it's important to collect data, but perhaps it would be something where a discussion in between member states and civil society would actually, or could actually be of impact.
We are looking into this because it's part of the implementation of the second phase of the CS. And more we see that the explanation, not even implementation, but the explanation, the way in which to look at certain concepts in the asylum acquis is more prominent in the discussion. And I fully agree that the discussion on that level should be including civil society very much. Even stronger, I would say that certain parts of this discussion cannot be without civil society, both NGOs and academia. And we have seen also yesterday some examples of that. So the answer in general is absolutely. We will continue this debate. It is partly, importantly, related to training, of course, but not only. It is also the way in which we describe in a joint effort the whole process as it really should work. In the end, the asylum acquis is a legal description. That's good, that's necessary. But sometimes from legal to practice, you need a sort of translation. There we have the contact committees, which is a good system. But even beyond the contact committees, you have the practical translation of the outcome on the floor, really on the floor, on the ground. And that is where we are active, and we certainly will involve civil society, yes.
Petra? Yeah, you have to press the button. Yes.
Very good. I'm Patrick from ICMC, and I just wanted to go back again to the theme of resettlement. As you may know, ICMC together with IOM and UNHCR has been working for some years towards building a European resettlement network, in which we now have around 300 members and reaching out to almost 2,000 stakeholders in Europe that are interested in resettlement, of which both government, local authorities, and a very big part of civil society actors, NGOs, but also universities, new stakeholders. We are very interested to discuss with you how we can work together with the resettlement network on planning this future for resettlement, which not only is resettlement, but of course other types of humanitarian admission that are now being explored and are going to be expanded. I think that this role of civil society in resettlement really should be recognized much more actively. We had expert meetings where civil societies, NGOs were invited the last years. That was already in 2008, where we were with ECRIS, CCME, ICMC. Unfortunately, I think that now meetings are taking place without these discussions. I hope that it was just because of problems to plan these meetings. So I wanted to say that we are really very interested to work with you on that. I think there's no future for resettlement without civil society and stakeholder cooperation. And also, we would like you to explore how also civil society can be operationally engaged, because many NGOs work in the field in resettlement operations, signed by governments and sometimes taking place or subcontracted by governments to do processing and other activities and being deployed. So I hope that you will have some plans to engage with civil society in 2015.
Simple, yes. Yes, because that is exactly what our aim in all these activities is to involve all the actors. Firstly, to prevent, as I say, duplication or other inefficiencies in practical approaches, but also for another reason, and I speak under the control of the Commission here, that resettlement is defined in a certain way. But if you look at the phenomenon behind resettlement, then you see that in practice we're already experimenting with other thoughts that we do not formally call resettlement, because resettlement has that specific definition, but that basically is the same idea. Bringing a large number of Syrians to Europe but say that it is not resettlement is fine, because the result is the same. This is humanitarian action, and that is good. I'm always intrigued myself by the Canadian model of public-private, or private-public actually, sponsorship. It's not what some people think, only private sponsorship, but I just had a few days ago a long discussion with the Canadian representative on this. There's always an involvement of the government because you need a status. You need to know if you have, in the end, right on the labor market, on social security, on social benefits. So there's always an involvement of two sides. So public-private or private-public sponsorship in itself is maybe something that is also in the area of resettlement, and there, even more than in the classical resettlement, NGOs are active and have more than a natural role, I would say. So we will certainly engage civil society. We have only started this year our activities on resettlement. For us ourselves to organize, to have an overview, takes some time, but I promise you we will fully involve you.
Anaïs?
Thank you. My name is Anaïs Faradjia. I work for the Red Cross EU office. I would like to hear a bit more about how you use the different inputs which are provided by civil society organizations, and how the discussions which we are having together with you, such as the thematic discussions which took place yesterday, what are your plans for feeding this into the work of EASO? We heard and welcomed you taking into account our comments and remarks regarding the format of the forum, but I wanted to know a bit more about on how you use this content-wise, and for instance, in relation to one of the consultations which you had this year on the training module on reception, how are you going to follow up on the inputs which you have received? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, because that's a very important one, both on the substance but also on the process. We are a very practical organization, and we try, no, more. We will continue doing that. That means that we gather information where we can get it, and as good as we can get it. We are not a political entity. We do not need, for formal reasons, to say we have consulted this and this, and so then it is good, irrespective of the substance. It's the substance first. So we use the best possible information. That might be very different in different subjects, and it might change over time within a subject. I will never be able to say exactly what and how we can use information. I know for some of you that is a certain point, because you want to see acknowledgement of your work for all sorts of reasons. We always will acknowledge the sources we use, because that's only fair. It's not pretending that we know everything, certainly not. We are only sometimes facilitators in a process, certainly on certain content-related subjects. We organize the process. We try to have a quality system, methodology in place, but we're not the ones that have all the expertise in-house. That would be impossible. That would be denying the wide variety of expertise. So if you ask what are you going to do exactly with my remark of yesterday afternoon at 2 o'clock, I cannot say that. That is very very difficult. That is how I look at civil society. That is why the EASO Consultative Forum is an open forum for everybody. We have not, like other organizations, a limited number which is closed in its numbers. We have an open invitation to everybody. Everybody can be part of the process, but the direction is the content and the reality. Also here, the picture of the reality is leading for us. If I look at the NGO world, I see that there are two sorts of NGOs, and now I'm very much generalizing, maybe even in an incorrect way. But there are two mainstream NGOs. One is those who work on the ground and are very much working on a day-to-day basis, improving within their own mission the situation that they encounter. And there are other NGOs, and sometimes these two are combined in one organization, that have as a mission to change and to work for something better in the future. Both are very legitimate. Both are essential in a good functioning society. But if I look at our day-to-day work, that is the groundwork. We are not a policy institute that is thinking about how in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years the European system should be. For that, we have the Commission and the Council and the European Parliament. We work within the actual existing European legal framework. And that is something that we should realize, because that is the reality. And if your remark is something that is going in the direction of this and this should be changed in the future, then the first one to address is not this agency. Of course, this agency will do its work and providing the evidence from the reality and say, okay, if this is plans for the future, you better know that at this moment we are at this stage. I hope that I make clear what is the way in which we look at reactions and contributions. For the annual report, for example, we get contributions of very different nature. Very practical ones, but also remarks that Dublin III is rubbish and we should have a totally different system. Maybe I agree, but that's not anything that EASO will ever write, because that's not what EASO is established for.
Yes, please.
I was thinking about whether you have plans or have done something already on giving the member states support on working with the public opinion in their countries. As I see it, I think that would be one of the things that would ease up things and make things easier for almost every country. I mean, now, for instance, sorry, my name is Carlos Rojas. I'm from Sweden, from Miklo. Do research on this and on migration. And for instance, now in Sweden, we have a government crisis that's only based on the fact that people understand too little about migration, and that we have 1/10 of the population that voted for a party that objects to the budget set for the reception and migration in general. So do you have any thoughts on that, on what role EASO could have on giving the member state support in working with the public opinion? Thanks.
Thank you. That's an extremely important subject. And also here I have to divide between the two roles that I explained earlier on. I think as we sit here, we can be concerned about the picture that is in the public opinion in general. And of course there are big differences between member states, but overall there is a picture that is not always reflecting what is the reality, both in Europe and outside Europe. That is why from the very start we have started collecting data as objective as possible on that picture of reality, because the best way to, in the end, support the debate with the general public is by providing a fair picture of a situation. If that is not the starting point, I think that there is no starting point, and you are always on the losing end. So for that, EASO has taken its position already and is providing information on a very regular basis, and we will improve and are improving that every day, I would say. I will not go into technical things like the comparison of definitions and the way in which even very clear definitions are interpreted in a different way in different organizations or member states. But that certainly is also something to be cautious about. Having said that, we already have made quite a big step in making more solid data available and making more comparable information between member states. And I explained the information documentation system. Also there, that will contribute to what the reality is. To be active, proactive, or even taking a certain position in the public debate, maybe in the far future that is a possibility that we should consider. Never on our own, by the way. That should be a European-led situation. But we're certainly not at that point. For that we lack the information, and in the real debate with public opinion, it's not for an agency to be there in any frontline position, only to give and provide the input. So, yes, in fact, I think I hope at least, we are contributing in a positive way to a fair picture. But no, it's not anything that EASO has in its own mandate.
Dr. Visser, I think you were very clear, and this is important to underline, about the nature of EASO, and also to underline what it is not. It is not a think pool, it is not a policy development institute. Sometimes in the European NGO community there may be some different ideas about the very nature of EASO, or there may be expectations that this very nature of the agency cannot fulfill. It is not, as you rightly said, is not meant for this. My question is, however, that while certainly acknowledging this and the great importance EASO work is doing on the support level, on the technical level, on providing emergency support, training, data, and so But now, after 4 years, we have a situation where the number of asylum seekers in Europe have more than doubled with respect to when EASO started. We have a situation where half or more or less of all asylum seekers are concentrated in 2 countries. I understand EASO has the objective and was constituted for the objective to make an effort to have a more balanced situation in all the member states. Not really equal conditions, but more or less comparable conditions with respect of reception, legal guarantees, procedures, and so on. And with that, to reduce the need for secondary movement of asylum seekers and of refugees from one member state to another. So, I come from Italy. 2/3 of 160,000 people who have arrived by sea this year moved on to other European countries. The big discussion about the fingerprinting and how you can oblige a person to leave the fingerprints and so. At the end of the day, yes, also in Italy we had a very important increase of numbers of asylum seekers in 2014. But as a matter of fact, as it was said also yesterday in Geneva, the High Commissioner's dialogue on protection at sea, apparently the system doesn't work. The system doesn't work. It is apparent. You have a Dublin system, but at the same time, 2/3 of all people arriving by sea anyhow go away from the first country of arrival. My question is, if it is true that the objective of EASO is to make an effort towards a European Union where you have similar conditions and where you have a full implementation of a European common asylum system. But the reality, you spoke rightly about the need to start from reality. The reality is that it is trend towards the opposite. You have concentration. So how do you live with this contradiction? Is it really possible to limit EASO's function to what you rightly described and what is in the mandate, when at the same time there is a conflict with the overall objective of the
Thank you very much for that question. I don't see a conflict with the mandate. I don't suppose that the fact that since we started the number of asylum seekers has doubled, that in itself is something that has any relation with the establishment of the agency, maybe apart from the fact that the European Union was correct at this time of the development of asylum and migration in its need to establish an organization that could deal with it. In that sense, there is a relation. It is the sign of the time, and it was more than time to have an organization like this. Second, there are some implicit messages in your remarks, and I would like to make them more explicit. Similar conditions, similar situations is not the same as equal distribution. We know that from within member states. Take, for example, now I will not take Germany, but France as an example. In France, there are areas which are more and more underpopulated. People go away, and even villages are deserted or half empty. And at the same time, Paris, Lille, and Marseille are overcrowded by migrants. It's impossible even within a well-organized country, to distribute and redistribute and equally distribute people in such an area. So it will also never be the case that we will have a mathematical distribution in Europe. We should keep that in mind. People go where they go, and that also is a human right. The right to settle where you want, the right to free movement. That's something that we should not forget in the discussion. So where we should concentrate on, I think, and that's exactly where the mandate of EASO is that the conditions, the way in which migrants, irregular migrants, are treated is everywhere more or less the same. More or less because entirely the same in human situations is only theoretical. But we can guarantee the same treatment, the same procedures, and the same quality all over Europe. In that sense, the mandate of and the task of EASO is enormous. Will that prevent secondary movement, whatever exactly secondary movement is, because that is not an easy terminology? No, it will not, because people will arrive, will ask for asylum, and then for whatever reason find out that they have family somewhere else and that they want to unite. They're free to. So there will always be a tendency of secondary movement. Or people will arrive, will get asylum, and say, well, maybe my capacities can be better, have a better chance if I go to another place. Why not? So it is the system that should work, but we should not change the mindset of people. That is a very dangerous pretension. Is it already like that? No, certainly not. And it is even more complicated. We are still in phase 1 of the Common European Asylum System. Phase 2 has been decided, but the implementation is only final next year. So a lot of member states are working at this very moment on adapting their procedures, their laws, their practices to that new situation. Just for example, a very, I think, important example, the access to the labor market. That is going down to 6 months in the new system as from mid next year. At this moment, there are still a wide variety, legal wide variety of access to labor market in member states. I hope that all member states will have implemented the new system by next year, by mid next year. That will make a substantial difference. Will it affect secondary movements? We don't know. We don't know if this is a factor that is a pull factor for people to go to one country and not to another country, or to not apply for asylum when they arrive and try to move on, as some very effectively do. We don't know exactly, but it might be. So we're in a dynamic process here as well. I think that with the resources that we have, that is where we should concentrate the role of EASO. If we have contributed in the end to reaching this goal, because the primary responsibility remains with the member states, of course, we are a support system, then I think we have done a very good job. At the same time, providing the evidence of what is the picture on the ground and where there are deficiencies, as you indicated. is something that I see also as part of our mission. What the reaction on that is, or should be, in a concrete case, is very different. If it is something policy-wise or political, then it is for the Commission to follow up, to do or not do something with some evidence that we have seen on an operational level. If it is something that can be changed, repaired, or whatever, by practical measures, then there is for sure a reason for EASO to start a dialogue with a member state concerned and say, well, we notice working or from our data or from our information that there is a certain situation, and maybe we can help you if you want to improve that. And we have very concrete examples with Italy, where Italy on the COI front was not very well developed. And together with Italy and a number of experts, we have supported Italy to set up a COI system, and we will continue to do so next year. So it's more nuances of grey than a very black and white situation. We do from our side where we are supposed to work, but at different levels.
Thank you. Maybe we take the final question if there's another one. Yes, please. Yeah, okay, so there are two. We'll take that, yeah.
Can you say something about the rescue program of the asylum seekers, in their arrival to Europe, mostly when we see it's left to Italy. So in a way that other member states can share, contribute, in the rescue program. I don't know if my question is not clear.
If you are referring to the search and rescue on sea, my answer is that EASO is not involved in that. And I'm strict in that because I want to prevent that you have a competition between different organizations. It is very specialized work. It's very difficult work. And we have a good division of labor here, so that is not something that is in our field, and we will not engage in that. The consequences, of course, when people come ashore and ask for asylum, then they enter the system, then they enter our area. So there, for sure, we are active. For example, take Italy again as example. We support Italy in their setting up of their emergency system, which is directly related to the situation you were referring to. But being active on sea in the search and rescue, no, that is outside of our mandate.
Michael Diedring with ECRA. Just two short questions and one request. I want to talk to two issues you didn't mention because civil society has not been involved in them. Over the past year, EASO has been involved in assisted processing pilots, and I'm wondering whether you could talk a little bit about the results of those and what your vision might be, what you've learned and what the vision might be in the future with respect to that. And secondly, to talk about the external dimension and what you are doing and what, again, the vision is there in the future. And then last, the request. We've been talking about the importance of the actual and what's really happening. And it's just struck me that perhaps if you would be willing, the request would be the extent to which you would be willing to report back to this group on your visits to reception centers, detention centers, or meetings with refugees and asylum seekers.
not to lose anything, I just write down. Joint processing. I realize that I sometimes say there are two sides to everything, but actually that is in my mind here as well. There's a lot of discussion about joint processing. That's why there are even different ways of labeling it. But actually, it's not that big deal. If you look at the asylum acquis, a lot of things are joint processing. What we do in training is also joint processing. What we do in COI is joint processing. Because you join forces, experts from different member states, for the same aim and the same outcome. But more specifically, we have started this year on a number of pilots on, say, one step further in joint processing, which is joining asylum officials from different member states in one situation in one member state, and see what together you can do at a certain situation. We have had pilots on Dublin, how the Dublin system works, on unaccompanied minors, on how the screening system works. Referral, and the fact that we have been doing that in itself has shown that it is more possible than some expected. And it has two very interesting observations here. One is the surprising observation that, to the surprise of those participating, the other member states use the same system as they do. Yes, that is what we call the asylum acquis. But just to realize at a certain way how far our mindset sometimes is still separate on the policy level. We create the same systems, the same legal framework, but in our day-to-day work, we do not even realize that it is a European system we work in, because it is called our national law on aliens or our national law on migration. So in itself, that is a very positive side effect, and maybe it should even be a main effect of joint processing, that you invest in each other, that you start understanding that we work in one system. In the end, it is one system. It has its different elements, but it is an overall system. That side effect, which more and more I see as a main effect, means that we are building trust. And take the Dublin pilot as an example, just as an example. The fact that everybody has an opinion on Dublin. We will not discuss that here, because then we'll certainly reach Christmas in this room. But the fact that people on the ground go to another member state and sit next to each other and see a Dublin case and say, my God, that is interesting. You do it actually not that bad. We thought that you were not quite good in your processing. But now we see that it is much better than we thought. So maybe next time, if we get a request from you, we look at it in a different way. We have some more trust that our interlocutors at the other side, that we didn't know so far, have the same way of looking at it, have the same concept. That's if that really is the outcome of joint processing, then we have a very, very important area in front of us. Because that is what finally we want to have, the convergence on the ground, that people realize, and then we can have similar procedures and similar approaches all over Europe. We have now entered the second step in the pilots of joint processing. We are preparing now 3, maybe more, but at least 3 larger pilot projects where we will go live, so to say, go really in the real process and see if people from caseworkers from different member states can jointly work in the asylum process of another member state. Not the whole process. There are all sorts of legal conditions to take care of, but to see how far we can work together in the very practice of the asylum system. It's an exciting experiment and promising so far, because the complications are, of course, there when you really sit together, but are far less from a fundamental level, for a principle or legal level, than many had thought. In practice, much more is possible, but they're very practical things. A Bulgarian typewriter has the Bulgarian alphabet, and not all the experts in other member states know exactly the Bulgarian alphabet. But that's a very practical thing that you can solve. You can make formats that are exactly equal in all member states, and then you know, even if it's written in another language, that this is where you tick the box. Just to give a very, very practical but real example from the ground. And we will certainly come back on it, on the results. External dimension, very short, also, who is an eye on the clock. Also here, I come back to the mission of EASO. If there are actions in the external dimension that are directly related to asylum, and where there is a clear added value, then there might be action from the agency. I say it in this restrictive way because in the external dimension there are many actors, and they're actors dedicated in changing the situation in what we call countries of origin and what they call the rest of the world. That is certainly not something where EASO should try to improve the living conditions in Somalia. That's not our task. As urgent, as necessary as it is, it's not our mission. If in that bigger context there are dedicated areas where others say, here we should really need something from specialist important in the area of asylum or humanitarian protection, where we have our expertise, then we are ready to support that. But that is, I feel myself much in the second line and not in the front line in this area. Last point, fact-finding reports, so to say, if I can translate it like that. So far we have not done that in the way that I understand your question, because we don't do real fact-finding missions in member states of that type. What we do, and that is public and on our website, When we have an operational support mission in a member state, then we work according to agreed areas and agreed measures, and that is evaluated afterwards and assessed. And when we do assessments like this, they are public, so they are published on the website.
I'm aware that there's another question, but I'm aware that you have to leave as well. So maybe we can take it later on, after the breakout sessions, when the director will be back with us. So thank you very much. We have the coffee break now. Straight after the coffee break, we go to the breakout sessions. There are the girls outside will show you where your session is being held. As I said, you have the color-coded tags which indicate which session you are in. Then I would kindly ask the chairs and the co-chairs to report back after the breakout sessions, which will finish at around 12:30, so that they can come back on the panel to discuss the outcomes. Then, of course, we will ask the co-chair, who's not an EASO staff, so the representative of civil society, to come on the panel. So enjoy the coffee break and the discussions. Thank you.